Oh, yeah, I was totally not just doing it because it tasted good, because I never really thought booze tasted good. I was doing it because I felt uncomfortable as a human being. And I always felt that everybody else got the manual on how to human, and I didn't. And I was just at a loss.
Hello, welcome to Recovery Demystified, a show where we explore our relationship to substances from a radical, non-religious, and empowering lens. Our sobriety is not a purity contract. It is an invitation to become curious about ourselves and find our own unique paths to growth and healing. If you've been questioning the role of alcohol or drugs in your life and haven't found the resources that you need, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello. Welcome back to Recovery Demystified. My name's Early. I'm so happy to have y'all here today. I am really excited about today's episode. It was a big growth point for me. So today I get to talk to Mary, and Mary emailed me a while back, actually, while I was at my retreat in Peru, and I received her email like when I was feeling a little weird after I came out of the jungle. And I saw it said secular AA. And as we know, I have pretty real trauma from doing the 12 steps and going through that experience in my life. And I'm working through healing from that. And when I saw the message that was like secular AA, a part of me was like, no, I'm not going to talk to anyone from AA. And then I had an opportunity to work through that from the sincerity of her email, and then also just the deep curiosity that was struck in me from the contents of her email, and her like just my, authentic interest in her experience, like what brings people to secular AA. And I had my moments in secular AA, and we get into it in the episode. And it was such a cool opportunity to be able to talk to Mary about this stuff, because as you'll hear, I get like my emotions come out, that traumatized part of me that went through the 12 steps comes out. And it was such a safe container to be able to speak with her about the things that were bothering me. And she was really able to like hold that stuff and explain like the different ways that things work for her. And it was like, honestly, such a cool growth point, because obviously I believe in multiple paths to recovery. I think that it takes what it takes. And if someone enjoys the 12 steps and it makes them feel good, I feel like everyone should just do whatever works for themselves. And that being said, it was just like an amazing opportunity for me to be able to process through with someone in a similar mindset, but slightly different, and like work to try to understand her process. So yeah, some of the themes in this episode that I thought were really cool and I really love to hear from her about were her struggles with her inner critic and dealing with shame and guilt. And then later on, how she uses affirmation, self-love, and like testing her own open-mindedness to combat that negative self-talk that had sort of like taken over her psyche, that was quieted by the use of alcohol. And I think there's so much quotable wisdom in this episode. I'm so grateful I said yes to her. It was like one of my favorite episodes to record, actually. And it's also, I'm learning more about doing remote interviews. So if it's a little bit different than the in-person ones, just, have some grace with me for that. I'm still learning how to edit and all of that. She also brought up something that I thought was really interesting. So she has ADHD, and she talks about how the one day at a time thing is helpful for her. And for me, one day at a time is like, it's just not it. In my life personally, I'm like, this is forever. Like, it's just what it is. And I'm happy with that. And that's what makes me feel good and works for me. And when people say one day at a time, I'm like, it just doesn't resonate. But she connects it to her neurodivergence, because she'll get sort of scattered and off track thinking about the past or thinking about the future. And when she reels it back in, like, and focuses on the here and now and the present moment and says, okay, just for now, just for today, I'm not going to have a drink. And that helps her. And it's also a coping skill for the struggles she goes with as a neurodivergent person. So I thought all of that stuff was just brilliant, like value bombs everywhere. And she talks about how she rewrote the 12 steps to work for her, And yeah, just a whole bunch of different stuff. Her whole life was characterized with being around addiction. She grew up in a family where her parents were in recovery and taking care of other people that had addictions. And anyway, yeah, I'm really grateful I said yes to Mary. And I think that you're going to learn a lot from this episode. She has so much wisdom and a really beautiful spirit. And yeah, thank you, Mary, for your time and your energy. And thank you for reaching out to me in an email. So if you've been thinking about reaching out to me in an email, dear listener, please do. I love the emails that are written by real human beings. It's like, sometimes I feel like I'm just talking into a void. And then when I'm actually able to connect with someone, even if it's just in an email, it's really meaningful for me. It helps me realize that I am affecting people's lives. So you don't even have to want to be interviewed. Just send me an email. Also, I am doing one-on-one coaching work on a sliding scale. And if you're interested in that, I have free 20-minute consultations. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And as always, if this show is resonating with you at all, if this is the recovery show you've been meaning to find and you're out there binge listening and it's doing something for you, it would be super stellar if you could do something for me and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Check the 5 stars and leave a review. All that stuff is incredibly helpful. It helps more people that need to hear this message find the podcast. And of course, share it with a friend. And if you've got a little bit of extra money that you want to throw down, there is a Patreon and a merch store down in the show notes. So without further ado, here is my episode with Mary. Hello, Mary. How are you doing today?
Hi, Early. I'm great. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here. Will you start by introducing yourself to the audience? Let them know your pronouns and just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Mary. I go by Mary C. in recovery circles, and I'm she, her. Those are my pronouns. I'm from Savannah, Georgia, and I haven't had a drink in 30 years.
Wow, that's a lot of time under your belt. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about your story with addiction and recovery. I'm curious what it was like for you to be a little kid, maybe some of your first encounters with substances, when things got bad, and then how you got into recovery. So just start wherever you'd like.
Okay, thanks. Well, my story is I knew about AA since I was very small. My parents were in AA. They met at a drying out tank in a hospital in the 1950s, early, and got sober together and joined AA and pretty much dedicated their lives to helping other people get sober from then on in the traditional AA way. And so I grew up going to roundups, conferences, meetings. I did a lot of homework, a lot of Sunday nights in the lobby of the electric company building where the meeting was on Sunday nights. All of my aunties and uncles were in AA. My parents' whole community were AA members pretty much outside of family. And I was the coffee girl when the meeting ended. I would go in and take coffee orders and give them to people while they were doing the meeting after the meeting. And I heard my parents' stories. They were speakers at lots of conventions, and now I have their recordings. And I went, in the beginning, there were no rehabs in the early 60s and early 70s, and they had 12-step calls. So the way it went was you would be the person answering the phone. You got a phone call, and you would go to the person that needed help right then and there for the most part. And so a lot of times there were no babysitters, and I just went. And I remember going to people's houses that had, one lady had put her head in the oven. Other people had vomit buckets on the side of their beds. They were bedbound and drunk. And so as a child, to me, that was normal. And I also never saw normal drinking because we didn't have a liquor cabinet. But the only time I saw my family drinking was at funerals or weddings or baptisms. We're Irish Catholic, so there's a lot of drinking in the birth family. I never saw normal, quote unquote, normal drinking anywhere. My slant was sort of like to look at it from an alcoholic point of view. I never saw anybody that could, quote unquote, hold their liquor or drink one drink. It just wasn't something I ever saw. Not that my parents ever talked to me about don't drink, it's not good for you. They never once said a word to me about one day this will be your future, or you shouldn't drink, or it's in your blood. None of that was ever discussed. And that is a plus in my life. Had they said don't do it, I would have done it more. And had they said one day you'll be in AA, I would never have walked through the doors just out of spite. So kudos to them for not shaming me about it or unnecessarily scaring me about it. So I remember my first drink, my niece and I got drunk when all the grown-ups had gone to bed. I think it was gin. And I remember running around the house and hiding under the bed and thinking that it felt really good. I have a distinct memory of that first time.
How old were you?
I was probably 9.
I know you said you didn't have alcohol in the house. Were your parents, you were at a relative's house?
Yeah, I was at my sister's house, and my sister was 25 years older than me. So my niece is actually 2 years older than me. So that's who I was drinking with.
Oh, very interesting. I wonder if you had misspoke when you said that, but that's interesting.
Yes. So there was alcohol in other family members' houses, just not mine.
Okay. Were your parents, after they met in that, you said there was not a rehab facility. How did you describe it?
Back in the day, there were either psych wards or drunk portions of the hospital where people were detoxed, and they might be given shock treatments, or, that's where my parents met, was in a hospital.
Oh, okay. In the drunk portion of the hospital. Interesting.
The drunk detox portion of the hospital. Yeah. And my dad had been there 3 weeks, and Mom was probably new, and he brought her breakfast tray in one day, and that's how they met.
Were they continuously sober for the rest of their lives after that?
Well, I think they slipped. That was, say, 1950. And so I would say they each slipped a little bit when they got out. And then Mom said one of us had to just stop. And so I did it first. And then Dad slipped maybe once after that. So I would say from 1953 on, continuously sober until the day they died. And Dad had about 30 years. He died in 1980 and Mom died in 2000. And she had about 48 years at that point.
And then you described a lot of other of your family members also being in recovery, and then some of them drinking heavily. Is that right?
There are members of my family in recovery. There are members of my family that just put down the drink and didn't go to any sort of a formal recovery process. And there are members of my family that are functional alcoholics and non-functional alcoholics.
And as a kid, being around all of that, like recovery advocacy work that your parents were doing and being in the homes of people that were like in their worst moments and struggling, you said that felt normal. Were there ever any other emotions tied up with it? Was there any type of like fear or worry or anything? Or was it just we're going to another sick person's house?
I don't think there was a discussion. It was just sort of like, I was brought along and I was, always had a book somewhere in a living room. And I think because I was so young that it was normal for me. I didn't know anything else. And I was aware that my parents were helping people. And I remember my mom said one time I was playing out front making mud pies with a little friend. And she heard me say, let's pretend we're having an AA meeting.
Oh my
and,
gosh.
like most kids, that's not their frame of reference, right? It was for me. And I just saw myself as completely separate. It was my parents' thing. It was their community. It wasn't my thing. That's how I viewed it.
Yeah, and reflecting back on it from adulthood, how do you feel about your childhood? Are you grateful for it, or is there any like stickiness with it for you? Like, how do you view it as an adult?
No stickiness. I do remember as a teenager being resentful that my mom was on the phone a lot with other alcoholics and like sponsees or whoever. And I felt like I wished that they didn't take up so much of her time, because I would be like, let's go do da 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 da. And she would keep talking to the people on the phone. Like her boundaries weren't that great with saying, well, I got to go now. And I do remember feeling resentful of the alcoholics that were talking to my parents or that were in their world. And in my mind, I always said, I'm never going to be one of those people. And I got to where I felt like I could look at people and tell if they were alcoholic or not. They just had a certain look, because I was in many rooms with many alcoholics and many events, and many alcoholics came to our house, and sometimes they slept in the guest room while they were drying out or getting on their feet. And family members also came and stayed with us. And at the time, I didn't realize it was because they were drunk and they were trying to dry out. I see that now. And what I am grateful for is that they never said, this will be your life. You're going to need AA one day. That was just never mentioned. And that was a plus, because had they said all that, like I said, I wouldn't have gone in the rooms of AA. I would have already discounted that it was even a thing that I would ever be interested in. I would have just out of spite said, not for me. And I probably would have, been miserable drinking for a lot longer. So yeah, that's a plus.
That all makes sense to me. It makes sense as a kid and a teenager to want a certain amount of your parents' attention. I think that that's like a survival trait of children, to want and need a certain amount of our parents' attention. And when you see them giving it to someone else and you're like, what about me? I feel like that makes a ton of sense.
I was resentful in that way. And there were times in adulthood when, like, my mom was in the hospital for something and her alcoholic friends would come up, and I had to just sort of be the door guard so that they wouldn't stay too long, because it was like, they were looking for what their needs were, and I was trying to be her protector.
Yeah. So when you had that first drink with your niece at the age of 9, were you aware that alcohol was what was causing all of these people's problems? Did you know that was the substance that you were using? Do you remember why?
No.
Why you drank?
No, I drank. It was probably because everybody was asleep, and it was sort of a forbidden thing we were doing. And no, I never made that connection. Never. No. I pretty much didn't make that connection that it was a harmful substance that I was trying. It was just, once I took a drink, it felt really good. And it was just that initial, sparkles. I remember that.
Yeah. It's very interesting to me, the gratitude, and it makes sense too, the gratitude for not being told that having an addiction is going to be your destiny or that you're going to be in AA one day. But I do wonder why perhaps they didn't tell you that alcohol was the thing causing these problems for people.
Oh, yeah.
Any thoughts about that?
I think because I was a child, and I also think when I was a teenager, I think they were all about attraction, not promotion. And in their lives, they would never, even there were drunks in the family, they would never take the initiative to go say, I'm watching your drinking and it's not helping you, and, I can help you. They never did that. They would never talk to anybody about AA or alcoholism unless they were asked first.
After that first drink and you had that sparkly feeling, what happened after that?
That was probably preteen, started going out with boys, and we would drink. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a thing called Ripple, and it was really nasty wine, but it was cheap. And I remember throwing up a lot, but, Ripple was sort of the thing. Then in high school, just going to parties and drinking whatever was there. We would buy beer and we would mix grape juice with vodka. And, there were lots of times where I got drunk and threw up, and I never was in a blackout that I know of. And I also never thought I shouldn't be doing this. I never thought, I've seen so many lives screwed up from alcohol. I don't think I'm going to do this. That was that was my parents' life, had nothing to do with me. Yeah. And I don't think I even smoked pot till I was 16. This was in the 70s, the early 70s. And that's sort of when I started, I'd say from 70 on, when I started experimenting with booze and alcohol. And then, there were lots of drugs available, LSD, MDA, psilocybin. Those were just things that I tried and had no effects from in a bad way. I was just experimenting with lots of different things.
So it all felt sort of like normal teenage experimentation. It wasn't like you were longing for that sparkly feeling or trying to avoid or escape anything?
Oh, yeah. I was totally not just doing it because it tasted good, because I never really thought booze tasted good. I was doing it because I felt uncomfortable as a human being. And I always felt that everybody else got the manual on how to human, and I didn't. And I was just at a loss in just putting one foot in front of the other. I was pretty much a follower, not a leader. And I also grew up as an only child, even though I had older siblings. They were not in the house when I was born. So I grew up alone. And I think I was used to being alone and finding my recharge in being alone and not being in a pack. Like to this day, I don't know how to pack. I don't know how to be in a pack, never been in a pack, until I came into the rooms of recovery. And that was a place where I could learn to be in a pack and what that was like. And I drank and used drugs to get out of my own head because the inner critic was so loud that it was paralyzing. That there was not a coach inside that said, yeah, you're doing great. You're fabulous. This is good. You did that. The inner critic was always talking 24/7, and it was never encouraging. And it was always just brought me to a place of being paralyzed. And so I drank to make it stop. And that's the only way it would stop, so that I could be relaxed enough to be with other people, or I could be relaxed enough to talk to someone, or whatever we did as groups. We did all kinds of stuff as groups. I had, lots of girlfriends in high school where we just drove around and did stuff and went to stuff, and it was always in a pack. So I did learn pack mentality from other people, and I still felt like I never fit in. Like they knew what they were doing, and they had big families and people around all the time, and I just felt like I didn't know. And the main emotions on the inside were fear, low self-esteem, shame, and guilt. Just shame and guilt, shame and guilt, shame and guilt. And I alternated between all those inner worlds. And so once I found alcohol, it could make all that stop, and I could talk freely. And my body was relaxed, and I felt capable.
Yeah. When I hear people describe their first contacts with substances like that, I just think no wonder you keep doing it, and no wonder you get an addiction if that is the kind of relief that the substance is giving you. I'm curious if you're willing to share what kind of things the inner critic was talking about. Like, was it talking about the problems with social interactions, or was it just all kind of things? Like, what type of messages was that giving you?
Oh, well, I mean, a typical inner critic, even today, will say, nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You're a loser. You have no authority to talk on this subject. Like the inner critic's been very loud all day, knowing I was going to talk to you.
Oh my goodness.
It's like a thing. And what I've learned in recovery is how to deal with that discomfort and how not to just check out. And so basically any substance I've ever used that has become addictive, it's to check out so that I don't have to hear the inner critic and then feel the bodily feelings of that and what's the use? I'm a loser. I'll never amount to anything. Your opinion doesn't matter. Just, body dysmorphic stuff, anything that could be critical of myself in any way, from the physical to the mental to the emotional, it will say. And I don't know why I'm wired that way. I guess it's a survival mode thing. I have learned that things that I can do in recovery that don't involve taking a drug or a drink to soothe that part so that I can function. And that what I'm learning now in longer term recovery is to say yes more often than I say no, because I used to say no all the time to stuff that would be really fun or might be enriching my life, but I was too afraid to do it. And so now I'm sort of in a no more fucks to give place that's wonderful in this point that I am in my life, where I say yes to things that are really scary because I want to do them. And I'm not going to let the inner critic stop the flow of me saying yes and going on to doing that. In point, I spoke there was a big AA convention in Vancouver this past August, International AA Convention, and they needed a speaker because someone had dropped out at the last minute. And I said, yeah, I want to do it. Because in a weird way, based on my childhood, This is a weird thing because of the way I was raised. I always wanted to speak at a big AA convention because my parents had done that. And that was sort of like a bucket list thing. And so I had my chance and I did it. And I went in that day. I opened the door. I thought it would be about 100 people. The topic was, what is a secular AA meeting? And when I opened the door and I started counting rows, it was about 400 people. And by then I was already up on the podium. And I had prepared and I just started talking like I'm talking to you now in the best way I know how, as just who I am as a human, and let that be good enough. And that's what I did. And that was one of my favorite things I've done to get through the fear. And it was a wonderful experience while I was in it. And then, of course, the inner critic came after that and said, you should have said this, you didn't do it that, if you'd only said that, blah, blah, blah. And that's why I have a therapist. So I can run things by my therapist to find out what triggered the shame and guilt to come up and where have I ever seen it before and why is it there. And I do EMDR therapy, which I find is very helpful because it also deals with the physical aspects of shame and guilt or inner critic stuff. And it did really help me soothe that whole thing where I just felt in a panic that I hadn't done it right. And I think what I'm realizing that my standards of what is right are based on a perfectionistic viewpoint that I tend to believe is true. And that's why I talk to other people and run things by other people so I can see if what I'm thinking is absolutely true or not, or maybe I can look at it in a different way.
Yeah, well, I want to say that I'm super grateful that you're on the podcast today, and I think that your story is really important, and I think that it is such hard work to overcome those messages from the inner critic, and it seems like you're doing a great job. And it seems like your inner critic is very powerful, but I do just want to say that there is an inner critic that lives in each and every one of us. And you're not alone in that. And in fact, I think that this is like extremely relatable. And I'm really glad that you brought it up. Yeah. So just thank you. And if I could speak directly to your inner critic, hey, Mary's inner critic, take it down a notch. She's doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. I'm just a human being and I have a story and I know what has worked for me and I'm happy to share it.
Yeah.
Because most of my story has to do with between my ears. It's not so much going to jail, getting DUI, having wrecks, losing my job. Although I did have to do a couple of medical leaves to keep from losing my job. Later in life, I became a flight attendant, and that's when I really started drinking. In my college years and high school, just sort of average drinking, and then in my 20s, I started doing yoga and meditation, and that really cured the dopamine quest. Like that enriched my body and mind in a way that I felt really comfortable in my own body. And I just felt all my chemicals were working and I had this sparkly feeling in a general way, maybe not as much as drinking gin, but in a general way I could cope. And I wasn't uncomfortable more than I was comfortable. And I did that with yoga and meditation. And, I was told and I believed that drugs and alcohol would affect the flow of that inner peace. And so I didn't do it. Any of that. And I just substituted yoga and meditation. And when I was around 30, I just applied to be a flight attendant on a whim and I got the job, surprisingly. And there were a lot of people drinking. And that was just sort of the way the job was set up, is that you worked hard all day and then you got to the hotel and you went at the bar. And so I was in a community of pretty hardcore drinking. And so I hadn't really experimented with drinking that much, trying to normal drink. So I just kind of tried to normal drink.
So in high school, you were partying, but it was like normal high school experimentation. And then in your 20s, were you completely sober when you were doing the yoga and meditation?
Yeah,
phase?
I was not drinking. I was not doing drugs or alcohol. I was not smoking pot. I was doing none of that. No, I was more of I just loved the way I felt so much with yoga and meditation. I didn't want anything to screw that up. And it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard to do that. And, so that was that. That was just sort of my quest and my mode.
How did you get introduced to yoga and meditation? And it sounds like there was a mentor involved there that advised you not to use substances. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a whole nother thing. It was just basically yoga that I started watching when I was a child. There was a woman that did yoga on TV, so I was always interested in it. My mom was reading this book called Autobiography of a Yogi, and I read it, and something in that book was pretty magical, and it just changed how I looked at things. And there was an organization that I got involved with called the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, which I now believe to be a cult. I don't advise anybody to be in it. And they did aura cleansing, and I had an aura cleanse, and I was advised, that would affect my inner peace. And so I took that advice. And I've since, found out that the person in charge of all that, they were scammers, grifters, horrible people, and a lot of people got sucked into it. And then I would do self-help organizations like, it was called EST back in the 70s. I can't remember what it's called now, has a different name, but they're like personal growth weekend workshops. And what I got out of that was I thought that everybody hated themselves on the inside, and that's just normal. But what I realized with being around other people talking about their inner workings, that not everybody hated themselves. Like, that didn't have to be the only option in life. Like, I just thought that was normal and didn't realize that, yeah, maybe not. Maybe it's not working for me. Maybe not everybody here hates themselves the way you hate yourself. That was the first time I was able to have an objective view on that, what was going on between my ears. And that was also the first time I started talking about what was going on between my ears. And what I also learned from the S training was that you can take on roles in this lifetime, just like you would be in a play, and you would wear different costumes for different characters. You don't have to be the same role your whole life. You can actually be more flexible and change easier and more often. And it helped me not be so rigid and to not be so attached to the roles that I played. And at one point, one of the exercises was you would figure out what your role was that was not supporting you the most. Like, for example, just say you were Debbie Downer. And so you would write down what Debbie Downer thought and then what she would say, and you would be that role. And you would be in a cocktail party with other people in this workshop, and your name tag would say Debbie Downer, and you would be in the role of Debbie Downer with every person that you mingled with in happy hour, and you couldn't get out of the role. Like, you were in the character of Debbie Downer, and everything you said in response to anything else was from that perspective. And I didn't realize at the time, but we had to do it for about 2 hours. So at the end, the point was, at the end of the 2 hours, I was really sick of that role. I was done with that. And I got to see the ridiculousness of it to the point where we were all pretty much laughing about our roles. And so I was able to realize I don't have to be this certain mindset forever. Certain mindsets are not inevitable. Certain roles in life are not inevitable. I can be who I want. I can think what I want. I can change a lot more easily. And I can also talk about my inner world. And I think in recovery, also what keeps me sane and sober now is that I'm learning how to be more transparent and how to talk about what's going on with me on the inside, with complete strangers or not, and labeling it, putting what's going on within me out in the air takes a lot of the heaviness out of it and a lot of the power to control my inner world out of it by just saying it out loud. Just saying it out loud crisply, I can hear what I'm thinking. And sometimes I just need to say it out loud and have another person listen to it. And I'm also learning that I don't have to act like I'm fine all the time. And I really admire people, you for instance, and a lot of people in the podcast I've heard, that people talk about all the awful stuff that happened. And I was raised in a Southern town by Southern parents in a Southern culture that to be ladylike was the goal. And if it was wrong, it wasn't ladylike. That's a whole nother hour's talk. However, what I'm realizing is I'm just learning, even at this point, 30 years down the road, going to meetings, that to be transparent and it's okay not to be fine. Like, if I feel like I'm a role of a leader in a recovery group, I won't let people know how bad it is because I don't want them to feel like there's no hope to get better, But I'm learning how to just say what's true for me and not be the fine. The fine thing just keeps the inner critic alive.
Yeah, and being in recovery doesn't mean all of your problems go away. Like, we still have a normal human amount of difficult shit to deal with, but it just means, like you're explaining, we have the space to be able to gain the skills to be able to deal with it all in a healthy way instead of just
Yes.
hiding behind the substance.
Hiding behind the substance and basically checking out. And like they say, and this is said in a million rooms, I'm trying to live a life I don't have to check out of. Or the checking out part isn't with drugs or alcohol. It could be going to bed, like for a day, being under the covers. But that is a lot less harmful than taking a drink.
That's right.
And I know that I'm not capable. Like, I still have addictive tendencies that I have to be aware of. And part of my recovery now is awareness of when I get into an addictive mode with anything, and to talk about it, to find a group for it, talk to my therapist about it. Awareness is what I want now, not checking out. I used to want to be basically asleep all the time, just sleepwalking through my life, because I just felt like I was never going to get anywhere or accomplish anything, and everything was harder for me than everyone else. And there wasn't a lot of joy or hope. And now I feel like there is joy and hope by just saying I'm good enough and having a community I can talk to about it and finding out what works for me. And a lot of it is somatic. Like, if I get in my head too much and I'm not in my body enough, all those thoughts whirl up into a place of paralysis. And so I'm learning to be more in my body as far as exercise, breathing. And my number one tool is to go outside. Mother Nature is the one thing that will change the channel on my brain. Even if I go outside in my pajamas, barefoot, if I go outside and I live in a beautiful spot where I can see the water right now with palm trees where I'm talking to you from, I can feel the wind, I can hear birds, I can see trees. That will immediately, it's like throwing cold water on the inner critic. That will change the tone.
Yeah, the power of Mother Nature is so deep. I'm curious, how long were you sober for in your 20s? And then you said you started drinking pretty heavily as a flight attendant.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, how long were you sober for in your 20s? And then what is the story with being a flight attendant?
Okay, so I would probably say from like 23 on, probably to 30, I didn't drink or do drugs. If I did, I don't remember it, but it was not a thing that I can think of I ever did. It wasn't like I was saying I'm going to be sober. I wasn't even thinking about being sober. It just wasn't on my radar. I preferred meditation to come to a place of inner peace for me, and various kinds of meditation. So when I was 30, I got a job, became a flight attendant, and I was usually the designated driver, if there was ever anything that we had to do. And, I really, even during training, I wasn't drinking, but little by little on layovers, I would drink with the crew. And I dated a pilot and drank with him. And that was the first time I remember really drinking a lot. And back then, this was before alcohol testing, drug testing. So every layover was like a full blown party. Like, we didn't have to worry about being drug tested or alcohol tested, and there was a lot of hangovers. I could tell you stories for a long time about things that we did this flight cruise, and crazy stuff, like we would bring the whole liquor kit to our hotel room, and there were like 48 on each side. So there's, and the mini bottles, I was just doing what everybody else did. And little by little, as I got more intimate with alcohol and was dating with alcohol, it became part of our thing. I just started liking it. It was like I didn't really have thoughts about it, but I liked it. And it took about 5 years before I realized I had a problem, maybe less than that. It got to where I knew, like, I would start saying, well, I was single and I was looking for a partner, and because I wanted to have kids, and the biological clock was ticking. So I was saying, oh, you're going to go to this singles event at this bar, but, you're only going to have 3 drinks. Like, I had already started saying all that. And, or I would be hungover. Like, most of my friends would be back at work on Monday, fine. But I would still be hungover by Wednesday. Like, alcohol really affected me in a way that the hangovers were brutal. But I still did it anyway. I would wait a day or two and then I'd start it again. And I could never have one drink ever. And I don't even see the point of one drink. I drank to get drunk. I drank to feel comfortable in my own skin, and it took getting drunk for that to happen.
And then at what point did you start putting rules in place or start realizing that maybe something was not going as planned?
A couple of years in, I guess, I realized I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew I had a problem with not being able to stop after one drink for probably 5 years before I actually stopped. And my thinking was, I know what it means to go to AA and take a white chip. I'm not ready for that. My thinking was, what if I'm misdiagnosing myself because I grew up going to AA meetings, so I don't know what normal drinking looks like. So I think if I drink every weekend, that's just normal drinking. What if I'm just misdiagnosing myself? And what if I'm just depressed and I'm not really an alcoholic? I'm going to screw myself out of all the fun. So this was like 1993. I'm thinking this up to 95. And I was thinking, I really want to get loaded at midnight, 1999. Like, party like it's 1999. Like, if I stop drinking now and take a white chip, I won't be able to do that then. Like, I was thinking of all the future weddings, wakes, baptisms, wedding showers, baby showers. I was going to screw myself out of having fun in if I declared this statement. And so that in itself, once later, when I started polling people, do you think I'm an alcoholic? First I went to a shrink, told her my whole story, said, do you think I'm an alcoholic or I'm just misdiagnosing here? And she, said, well, I don't know, but both your parents are alcoholics. You probably ought to look at what your chances are of being alcoholic, And I started polling people, like, do you think I'm an alcoholic? This is what I'm doing. And my brother by then was about 5 years. He had quit drinking. And he said, well, maybe a sign would be if you start buying it and drinking it at home alone. And then I started buying and drinking at home alone. I was doing that already. And, my mom said, I don't know, but if you have to poll people to see if you're an alcoholic, maybe you should look at that question. Like, I like broccoli, but I don't poll people on, am I eating too much broccoli? So what I did was, I had a lot of trouble at work where I would have to go on medical leave because I'd called out sick too many times. There was one time I went through TSA and I didn't want to leave the vodka because there was a little bit left in the bottle. And they pulled out this giant bottle of vodka out of my suitcase in the middle of the TSA line. And I was mortified. And I just remember knowing that I couldn't stop, knowing I probably had a problem, but not wanting to do anything about it. Just not done yet.
Yeah, you were having that internal argument that I think happens a lot with people where it's like the part of you that still wants to drink is fighting with the part of you that knows that it's hurting you.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, personally, I think that the concept of being an alcoholic is sort of an arbitrary term because obviously you were experiencing negative repercussions and it would be beneficial in your life to try to address those things. So trying to see if you meet this specific criteria for a sort of undefinable thing was preventing you from being able to improve your life at that time, which is why I definitely invite and encourage people, if you're questioning the role of substances in your life, you don't have to compare yourself to any sort of benchmark of terrible things happening in your life. If you've got one hangover and you don't want to have another hangover again, it's okay to try to explore that internally.
Right. And the way I say it is, if you're on a train and you know that it's going to hit a brick wall, it doesn't matter if it's going 150 miles an hour or 5 miles an hour. The point is to get off the train. And there's nothing wrong with being a high bottom drunk, which is what I consider myself to be, although that's a label, that's an old timey alcoholic AA label. It's all about when I finally got to the sick and tired of the argument in my head about it, and the way I do things. And this is what happened. By then I was flight attendant and I was doing computer shows, selling products for someone. And I was at a bar in Washington, D.C. and I had just gotten dumped by my boyfriend. And I was getting ready to get drunk at this Irish pub. And the flight attendant sitting across from me, who was also in recovery, she just looked at me and she just said, I just don't think you should be doing that. And I just remember it as clear as day. I don't know what happened, but I pushed back from the table and I didn't get drunk. And I went to a meeting the next day in Baltimore and the whole point of me going to any meetings at all in the beginning was to prove I was not an alcoholic and I didn't need AA. So I was just going there to judge every single thing that was said so that I could say, that's not true for me. All of it was to say, that's not true for me. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be one of those people. I didn't want to have to go to the meetings the rest of my life. And I sure as hell didn't want to say, I'm never going to drink again. And to this day, I still get a weird feeling in my stomach if I say I'm never going to drink again. That just feels clenchy in my chest. I don't say that, and I don't think that. I just think I'm not going to drink this afternoon. And at night, I say, I'm just going to keep doing this tonight. And then in the morning, I get up and say, I'm going to keep doing this. Because what it looked like to me was the people that I saw in those meetings were laughing. They were happy. They were laughing at themselves. And I was very serious when I came in. I was like, what the fuck are y'all laughing at? This is serious shit. Like, I'm in trouble at work. I am miserable on the inside. Why the fuck are you laughing? I was just so serious. And I just wanted to, please don't let this be my life. Like, no. So little by little, I just went to meetings, and I went to, at first, adult children of alcoholic meetings, because I figured that was my problem. And then I went to those and I thought, yeah, but this part where I can't stop drinking is also a problem. So I started just anonymously going to meetings and sitting way up at the top where no one could see me. And I didn't talk to anybody for at least a year, and didn't get a sponsor, didn't do anything, just listened. That's all I did. I would just go to meetings. I wouldn't should myself. I would just listen. And if they said, do you want to share? I'd say no. And so over time, I guess my resistance, I identified more with what the people were saying. And somebody occasionally would describe my inner thoughts perfectly, like they were me, like they were in my brain. And I couldn't deny that, yeah, there's somebody else like me in here. And they look happy and they're laughing, so it just little by little, the resistance came off from just putting my butt in the seat. And I cafeteria picked everything because I am very resistant as a person and very independent. And I definitely don't go with tribe speak, or I don't like to be shamed into anything or told what I'm supposed to think or believe or say, or, so I came in that way, and I'm still that way.
Did it feel like that was your only option of what to do at the time, was to go to AA?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did. That was in 1995. And by then there was, adult children of alcoholics. There was Codependence Anonymous, went to some of those. There was emotional sobriety. There was AA and there was NA. And NA really wasn't my problem. It was alcohol, was the most readily available drug that I would allow myself to do. And so all I did was, and the only advice that I know has worked for me is literally a day at a time. Of all the statements, and a lot of them are very corny in traditional AA, and a lot of them are used in a shaming way, but I find one day at a time has helped me more than anything I've ever heard, because I also am neurodivergent and I have ADHD. So I was always all over the place. Like, my wheels were going, but I wasn't getting anywhere. And that one day at a time brought my focus back into just today and quit looking at the past and the future, so I could actually focus for a minute. And if I went to bed that night and I didn't take a drink, and I didn't go somewhere to a party where they were drinking, because in the beginning, for about a year, I was called a slam clicker, which is in flight attendant terms. When you go to your room and you slam the door and click the lock, that means like you're a Debbie Downer, you're not going to the bar. And so I slam clicked for a year, and I picked rooms that didn't have the mini bar because I didn't trust I could go to a bar with a crew, or any bar anywhere, or any party where they were drinking where I wouldn't take a drink. So I just holed up, and I went to meetings and I just holed up. And I would have, trips where it was a New Year's Eve trip and I wouldn't go. I just stay in my room for 48 hours, period.
A lot of times in early recovery, choosing a bit of isolation can definitely save our lives, especially when we're not ready for the discomfort of being in that party vibe situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So were you sober continuously from that moment at that Irish pub when the other flight attendant called you out?
Yeah, I was. I remember that. I can see myself there. I totally remember that. And that was 30 years ago. And So, but part of my story is 16 years in, which has been almost 16 years later now. I went and lived in California and way off grid in a place that took almost an hour to get into town. And I didn't go to meetings. I didn't have a sponsor. And it was a very difficult job that I had. And I had all kinds of feelings. It was stressful. And I thought, oh, I'll be fine. I've got 16 years. I don't need freaking meetings. I don't need a sponsor. I'm good. And where I lived was the Emerald Triangle, which is like Mendo County, Humboldt, where the best marijuana in the world is grown, in my opinion. And it was just normal. And I just, in my head, I think because I didn't have anything to counteract it and I didn't tell anyone how I was feeling or what I was thinking, I planned before I left there, because I was going to be there a year, before my end date was up, I was going to sample some of the marijuana that was grown in the region. And I didn't tell anybody. I thought that because I didn't want anybody to tell me not to, because I had already made up my mind at that point. And I did. And a couple times I had some friends come out and visit and smoke pot, because at that point I was so stressed out on the job I had that I could get no relief. And I just thought that I could, pot would give me relief, physical and mental relief from the stress I was under, that I couldn't conjure up in a way on my own. And I just talked myself into it real easy. I justified the shit out of it real fast and kept it real secret. And to the point that I think for me, it wasn't about I smoked the pot, and it wasn't about the experience I had when I was stoned, because it didn't do the trick, quote unquote. It wasn't the high I was looking for. The thing that I feel like was the slip for me in recovery was that I wanted to keep it a secret and go back to my home group in Savannah that I'd had for years and not tell anybody I did that. And because the pride of having continuous sobriety, which I do with alcohol, was what was motivating me. Like, nobody needs to know. I'll go back and I'll still be this wise woman in sobriety, and nobody needs to know this, And so what I did was, in California, I went right after I did all that, and I realized this is ridiculous. I went to an AA meeting and I told on myself and I said, I've done this, and in California, there is a true thing called California sober. They were like, well, how many times did you do it? It's not really a slip, and I was like, well, to me it is, because I was going to lie about it. And to me, to be inauthentic and to be prideful and ego driven and to have one up on some false pride of saying I've got this many years sober was the slip. Like, my ego had gotten in the way of being a truthful person. And that is who I don't want to be. I want to be authentic. I want to be transparent. I want to have inner peace and love and joy and love myself. And I couldn't do that if I was lying.
Yeah, I'm really curious about something actually, so one of the frustrations I have with 12-step programs is the focus on continuous sobriety and the lack of open-mindedness about things like slips and harm reduction, because that 16 years does not disappear from your life if you go out and smoke weed.
Oh, totally. Yes,
and
I agree
also,
with you.
When you talk about those struggles with the inner critic, and then I hear you talking about that 12-step framework of that focus on continuous sobriety, that is what pushes people to lie. I took dirty chips, as they call it, when I was in AA, because I wanted everyone to be proud of me. I wanted them to clap for me when I got that 30-day chip. So I lied because the focus, I take accountability for my own actions. Like, obviously lying is bad, but it's because the focus of that program is that you get rewarded for being completely pure and completely perfect, and then it takes that inner critic and it doorbell and it places.
Hold on. So a lot of people get dirty cakes. They call them dirty cakes in LA, or dirty chips. And I agree with you, Early. I think that it is unfortunate. I think relapse is a part of recovery, and accepting that and accepting people that have, gone back out and, embracing them with open arms and welcome. And, and what I did when I smoked pot, it was a learning experience. I'm not ashamed of it. I did it, and it doesn't discount anything else I learned in sobriety before or after.
Yeah, and your 16 years don't go away. And what I was trying to say before is also that it reinforces that inner critic mentality by putting all of the blame on you instead of on the culture of the program, and that thought inside your head, like, oh, this is selfish, this is ego driven, my desire to lie is based on my own character defects, when in reality you're in this tribe of people that you want to continue to approve of you. And within like the moral framework of that program, if you are not completely pure and completely perfect, that takes away their approval of you. Those are the conditions under which you are wanting to lie. It's not because you're ego driven or selfish. It's because you want the approval of these people, and these people require complete perfection in order to get their approval. And
Agreed.
That whole inner critic thing is like, that was one of the problems I had at AA, was that it taught me to find the worst in myself, but I already thought the worst of myself.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. So why? And it's all tribal approval. It's more about tribal approval than it is about being honest. And, because the people that speak the loudest seem to me in a lot of the rooms are the ones that are real pure dogma, finger pointing, shaming, your ego, self-will run riot, all that stuff that I have railed against in traditional AA. And I'd love to talk to you about more how I came to where I am now in recovery in AA. But I am well aware of the shaming value and that whole thing where people say you can't even talk about relapse as part of recovery because that will encourage someone to relapse. So just give them permission. And that's just not understanding the whole process. But it's also enveloped in a bigger thing, which is a faith-based recovery.
Yeah, and there's like a big danger to it too, because they say if you go back out and use again, you're gonna die, and then people get this self-fulfilling prophecy where if they go back out and use again, it's like an excuse to completely spiral out of control, when a lot of times it's more like your experience where you get a wild hair, you smoke weed, and then you move on with your life because you have been in recovery for 16 years and that's what you're used to now.
Yes.
I'm curious because you contacted me from an organization called Secular AA, which is why I was really interested in talking to you. At what point in your recovery, and it also sounds like you're a total rebel, like you just want to like fight back and not like do what people tell you to do. At what point in your recovery did you get out of the traditional AA and start doing the secular AA?
Well, it was about 10 years ago. And I had been in a home group for 18 years, a women's group here in the South, and they were my ride or die people. I knew that we were all very different, but I thought if I ever called somebody in the middle of the night and said, I'm going to drink, talk me out of it, that they would, right? We were there for each other. And in my own awareness, I started hearing more and more shares that were religious, that were more about my higher power is God, may you find him now, which is said in the preamble. It was just like all of a sudden I started realizing that that all the shares were about find God, stay sober. Like, we're going to hook you up to God. We're going to get you to do service, and then you're going to be fine. And in my thought, churches are a business, and their business is getting people to find a God or the God, however you want to put that, and that God will keep you sober. You just hand it over to God. And it just got very religious, and the shares got more religious. And in the beginning, when I was in AA, your higher power was your business. You didn't really talk about it. Nobody else did. Nobody said you have to have this higher power or you're going to get drunk. And what are you going to do if you don't have God in a moment when you're by yourself? God's going to be the only thing to keep you sober. And I was just like, how does someone, like, I would think if I was new to AA and I just walked in this room tonight and heard these people talking, I would never come back. Like, if it had been really religious when I first came in, I would never still be here. I just am not. If I want to go to Bible study, I will go to Bible study. I don't want to. And if I want to go to church, I will go to church, but I don't want to. So I don't want to combine my AA with church. And it just seemed that my shares became counteractive to whatever was said in the room for the newcomer. Like, you don't have to believe in God to get sober, and, you can do it this way and that way. And I felt like I wasn't really able to get my own recovery because I had to counterbalance what was being said in the room. And it was like the scales fell off my eyes, and all of a sudden I just had an awakening that this is faith-based recovery. This is skewering in a way that is Christian. in my point of view, in my experience at that time. And so we had a group conscience, and I just brought up that I didn't think we should say the Lord's Prayer at the close of a meeting, that it discounted anybody else that might have any other religious leaning or no religious leaning. And that was like a bomb went off. Like, I got a lot of flack for that. And to the point where they said, well, it's chairperson's choice. And then they doubled down on it. And they would only choose people that would say the Lord's Prayer. And then it was also like, okay, well, you can close however you want. It just can't be Wiccan, or it can't be pagan, or, jokingly. And then people in the rooms would say, well, you don't have to believe in God. Your God can be a doorknob. And that's like just a passive aggressive criticism, and they would laugh. And I was kind of like awakening to my own atheism. I was awakening inside here that I no longer internally thought like I used to think about spirituality, religion, Christianity, Catholicism. My whole idea of the universe was shifting on the inside. And I think my perspective, what I was hearing was so religious that I thought I can't sign off on this anymore, for them to be trying to convert newcomers to God. Like, I just don't want to be a part of this. And I was concerned because what am I going to do? I need a meeting. Like, I don't think I can be out there by myself staying sober. Like, I've proven that that's not good. So for some reason, there was a secular meeting. Someone had already started that came from Manhattan that was in my little town. And I went. And when I heard the preamble, I was like, wow, this is neutral. This is inclusive. This is diverse. These are no prayers. This is great. To me, this is what AA was like when I came in the beginning. And so I was really thrilled. And I found a daily reader, which was called Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings for a 12-Step Life, that was in that meeting they were using for a topic discussion. And that book just blew my mind. And I found out more about this thing called secular AA. And it just so happened that this was like in April. In August, there was going to be an international conference of secular AA in Toronto. And so I went. I went by myself, didn't know anybody. I just thought, I want to see what this is. I want to check this out. And as soon as I got there, and I had this daily reader, so I also wanted to see if the writer of that reader was there, and all the other secular books that I had found in the meantime. I wanted to find those people. And so as soon as I got there, it was like, that's how I wished AA had always been. And I'd found my tribe. And with every speaker telling their story, I could relate. And then I got every book known to man, and I talked to every author while I was there. And I came back to Savannah more encouraged than ever, and started 2 other meetings. And they're still going. There's a women's meeting in person, there's a women's meeting online, and there's a co-ed meeting in person once a week as well. And there is a need. In this town, there's like a church on every corner. And I would say the traditional aspect of AA has a lot to do with a higher power, having one, and having one be God, or people having to explain what it is. And I found my home in secular AA. I still find my home in secular AA. I want to normalize secular AA for the world, and for people who would not ordinarily go to an AA meeting because it's God, they think God. And for a lot of reasons that a lot of people don't go to AA meetings, I find that secular AA is surprising to people. People that are in traditional AA never even heard of it either. When people come to a meeting, they go, this is so welcoming. The main thing they say is that it's welcoming. And that is because to thine own self be true. And even in our preamble, we say secular meetings endeavor to maintain a tradition of free expression and conduct a meeting where alcoholics may feel free to express any doubts or beliefs they may have, and to share their own form of spiritual experience, their search for it, or their rejection of it. So, in our meetings, we do alternative AA steps, agnostic steps. We do different books that we use for topics of discussion. A lot of us are still using Beyond Belief, Agnostic Musings, which is such a vast, so many topics in there. And I just want secular AA to be normalized and to be a choice for people to still be in the rooms, still want a 12-step community, but don't feel they have to have a Christian slant or any kind of religiosity at all, and not be shamed. And it's not about dogma. I find that recovery is about action, not so much what you believe. It's about what are you doing? Basically, what are you doing? Because I can believe a whole bunch of stuff, by myself one afternoon, and I can make up stories in my head and have complete arguments, win and lose, courtrooms with the defense lawyer, and I'll be the prosecutor at the same time. But really, what action am I taking to not take a drink today? That's what counts. And what do I do consistently? And I found what works for me now. And I go to secular meetings, and since COVID happened, Zoom really increased the growth of secular meetings because we all had to go online. And so we all hooked up, and there are like 400 secular groups now. And there's a secular meeting you can find anytime, day or night. And, we have events. You can go to secularaa.org for events and conferences. And that conference in Toronto really enriched my recovery, and secular AA has enriched my recovery in a way that we can talk about what traditional would call outside subjects, outside issues. We can use non-conference approved literature, which AA doesn't really approve literature or disapprove. It's only what they've published. They have AA published literature. They don't say you can't read other books. Because to just say you're only going to read the big book, 164 pages for the rest of your life, no, I'm not going to be in that book club. So I'm on the board of Secular AA because I've done a lot of volunteer work, and I really am, my heart is in it, thriving, in Secular AA thriving as an option for people. And it's an option for me, and I want to keep it alive. And I'm also going to be doing a workshop at the International Conference of AA in November 13 through 15. It'll be in Phoenix, Arizona at the Hilton Resort, and I'm going to do a workshop called Silencing the Inner Critic, crafting an affirmation that will stick, and I've learned affirmations help me with the inner critic because you get what you focus on. And if I focus on what I don't want, that's what I'm going to get. And usually when the inner critic is in a tape loop, it's always saying the thing I don't want. And so I've learned how to craft affirmations, sort of like songwriting, like when you get the right song words mixed with the right melody, it just clicks. And same with an affirmation. I found when I find the right affirmation for me, and I have a formula that I work with to get it, and then I practice it till it's right. And when I know it, then I use that as a way to pick myself back up. I use it as a shield when I feel like I'm in not friendly territory. I use it as something to remind myself who I am and what I want to focus on. And can I give you my favorite affirmation?
Of course.
Okay. So my favorite one that I use a lot that just comes up whenever I need it is, I am a strong and beautiful woman, open and free, lovingly trusting myself and you. And I get tears when I say it still because tears signify to me that it's the truth from my gut coming up through my heart, out of my mouth.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And it's really exciting to hear that you took all of the pain that you've been through with the inner critic and you're turning it into something like really bright and healing and bringing that to other people. So that's super inspirational. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm curious. So I also went to a secular AA here in Northwest Arkansas, and I worked with an atheist sponsor to do my 12 steps. My higher power was Mother Nature because obviously Mother Nature is a power greater than myself. However, as you were talking about the 12 steps feeling inherently Christian, or those traditional AA rooms just being like inherently Christian, I was never able to divorce the Christian morality from the 12 steps itself. And no matter how much I believed that Mother Nature was more powerful than I was, it took away the accountability of me learning how to trust myself. Like, I was learning to not trust myself. And the more I prayed and asked Mother Nature to remove my cravings or whatever, the less I believed it to be true. And it never felt authentic. It always felt like Christian dogma with a Band-Aid over the top of it. And that's just my experience. And it really, really, really did not work for me. And it felt terrible the whole time. So I'm curious, it obviously works great for you. What do you do with the 12 steps that is different, that makes it not feel Christian to you?
Well, I have a whole book on different 12 steps that are the atheist 12 steps, the agnostics 12 steps. And, like in the 6th step, we say, I not character defected. I'm not defective. My character's not defective. I call it non-productive, that I've been using non-productive coping skills my whole life. Like, I just reworded the whole thing. And a lot of us have written our own 12 steps. There's a whole book called The Little Book of AA 12 Steps. And, and it's like step 2, I'll read you that, is came to believe and to accept that we needed strengths beyond our awareness and resources to restore us to sanity. 3, we made a decision to entrust our will and our lives to the care of the collective wisdom and the resources of those who've searched before us. So even though Mother Nature is my higher power, like this, Mother Nature is what brings me back to inner peace and helps me become aware of a place of relaxation that I can't get to by myself. And so my prayers are more sort of a universal thing, and I wouldn't even call them prayers. I find other humans help. I talk to another human being when I'm having something I cannot figure out. If there's a perspective I can't get past, because a lot of my perspectives are just black and white. If I need to get more flexibility in my perspective, I'll run it by someone and let's hear their perspective. So I use other human beings as a higher power. I guess I go to meetings, I read books, I listen to podcasts, I talk to other humans, and I go to Mother Nature when I want to do something addictive that's not good for me. That's how I handle it. But I do see what you're saying about the whole template comes from a Christian sort of template. I get that. And I also hear a lot of people in rooms of what I call traditional as opposed to secular AA. They always do the caveat of, I had a problem with the God word, but this is how I fixed it. And they always say, they might not be Christian or religious, or they could be atheists, but they stay in the traditional rooms and they just somehow do a do-over with the God stuff. I prefer to not deal with the God stuff at all, or religiosity, or blaming, shaming, higher power has to be God, or you're going to die, any of that. I prefer to have a more welcoming, open, and diverse space that I find in secular rooms of AA. I just find it there. So I don't really worry. I will go to traditional rooms if I can't go anywhere else. But my first choice would be a more secular approach. And I would say if it's not working and you're feeling like you're doing something that's inauthentic and it's creating more stress, then if you're being more uncomfortable than comfortable, it's not the right space for you. And there's so many choices nowadays to find recovery and inner peace that traditional AA and AA as a whole and 12-step recovery as a whole is definitely not the only place to find it. I say to thine own self be true. And the point for me is to not go backwards and to be aware, to be more aware of when I'm being addictive, because I have problems with sugar. I can addictively eat food for stress relief. I can definitely doom scroll for dopamine. Like, that is a problem. And I probably need to go to a 12-step group for that now, because it is way beyond my control.
Yeah, we are not. Our brains are not ready for smartphones evolutionarily.
No, and I'm really in the throes of that. And so I think I want to be aware now in my recovery to seek solutions wherever they are.
Yeah. And another thing I experienced when I was doing 12-step was a lot of what you're talking about, where people would, be like, well, this is how I solved the God problem or whatever. And I would go to like the queer AA, and I don't identify as a woman, but I feel comfortable around women. So I would go to women's AA, and then I went to atheist AA. And in all of those 3 groups, I would see people with their big book, like crossing out half the words in that book. And in my mind, I'm like, why are we crossing out half the words? Why aren't we just creating something new? Which is why I ended up making Recovery Demystified, because I'm like, okay, the 12 steps, like, that obviously works for some people. And something that hurt me so bad that I hated was that when they read in the beginning and they say 12 steps works for everyone except an unfortunate few.
Yes.
Like, who are not capable of being
honest with
themselves. And I was like, I'm not fucking unfortunate, and I can be honest, and maybe this just doesn't work for everyone. But yeah, I saw all these people crossing out half the words in the book. I felt insulted. I was like, my character's not defective. I'm not unfortunate. I am honest. And that's why I went and was like, take the 12 steps, leave them behind for me, and just create something completely brand new and shiny that's just different. Yeah.
I really applaud you for that. And it's so evident in everything you do and you write. Your Substack, your podcasts. I saw you being a guest on Dopey Nation. I was like, your joy and you just going with you and did thine own self be true is just, it's contagious. And I applaud you for that. And, you know, the thing about AA is I want to put in a plug that if there are people that need a 12-step room, there is secular AA now. There is a place to go that you don't have to even have a big book present. And my question also is AA, when did it become all about the big book? Like, is it big book based? Because it wasn't when I was growing up, and it wasn't when I was in early recovery 30 years ago. But it just now seems to be sort of the Bible. And you're either pro big book or not. And now there's the thing called the Plain Language Big Book that came out last November. And I read it, and I was in a group that discussed it, that were people of all traditional and non-traditional approaches in AA, but it was AA people. And there were so many people that were against it because they feel like the big book is sacred and you can't change any of the words, because if you do, the magic won't work and you won't be able to stay sober. That's my perspective. But for me, the Plain Language Big Book, as a person with ADD, the font is better, the color is better, every page is easy to read, the way they block it up, the way they modernize the language. There's not the 1939 speak, but it's still the same message. So in a way, it's like putting lipstick on a pig. So it's the same message. That hasn't changed, but the language has changed. And they're saying the Plain Language Big Book is for people with a fifth grade reading capability, and not above that. And I'm insulted. And I told them that in the group. I go, yeah, listen, I have more than a fifth grade reading comprehension. I like this book better. You know, you don't understand neurodivergence. They thought they did it for people that were incarcerated so that they could better understand what AA was all about and not have to read the big book and listen to like 1939 flowery language. That a lot of people love that and they worship every word in the big book. But I'm here to say the big book never got me sober. The big book truthfully never inspired me. I have deep respect for it, that it has gotten a lot of people sober and has inspired a lot of people, and they absolutely love it, and I respect the shit out of that. Not true for me. And I want to put a plug in for the Plain Language Big Book. I think it's awesome, and I hope they reprint it. And then I hope they get a big book for women, a big book for LGBTQIA people, a big book for people of color. I hope there's a big book. Now that this book has been written, there's a wedge in the door, and I hope that they will tailor the big book out of 1939 into a modern language. Yeah, and that's my rant on that.
And remove the whole two wives chapter. Did they remove two wives?
Remove all that. And to the atheist agnostic is so condescending.
Oh, yeah.
It's just horrible. It's horrible. But, you know, I say I went out and started secular AA meetings. You've gone out and started Recovery Demystified. The great thing about getting sober is that we now have room to do stuff in our lives that help other people and help ourselves also. So bravo, our creative energy is flowing. I'm not hiding with a hangover anywhere. I'm not in bed with the covers over my head. I'm out in the world being me and being okay with that. And the thing that I have found the most, besides one day at a time, that's helped me is to learn to be compassionate with myself and to love myself and give myself slack the way I give other people slack, the way I love other people. To learn to love myself has been a lifelong process, and I'm sure till forever, I'll still be learning that. But that has helped me change. Loving myself through change instead of beating myself up has been the one thing to let that love in for myself to allow me to do hard things.
Yeah, it's extremely important. And that was a huge game changer for me, too, because when I hated myself, I had no reason to quit drinking because I would just punish myself with alcohol. And then when I began to learn how to love myself, I had a reason to treat myself better. So that's so important.
It's a foreign concept. It's something that, we have to kind of learn as we go.
Yeah. Was there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to get to?
No, just let your listeners know they can look at, when they're looking for AA meetings, they can always look for the secular filter, or they can look for Worldwide Secular Meetings meeting app. And there's, go online. If you just want to check one out, you turn your screen off. You don't have to talk. You can just listen.
Yeah, everything's worth everything's worth trying.
Worth a try.
I actually have one last question for you. Did you ever get back into the yoga and meditation that provided you so much peace in your 20s?
The yoga, no. But I still do guided meditations. I don't do anything with a guru or anything formally, but guided meditations and affirmations are the one go-to. I'm just getting back. I've had lots of physical challenges in sobriety. People have died, but I've also had a lot of diagnoses, like you name it, I've had it and still dealing with it. So I've learned to just let myself move my body. It doesn't have to be yoga. It can be, but just movement and keeping moving is sort of my go-to now, because I can put my shoes on and just go outside and walk down the street. Move a muscle, change a thought. And at some point, I would like to start a support group for people with chronic pain, which I have. And I think what I didn't tell part of my story was that, I've had cancer several times. I have a lot of things happen, a lot of diagnoses, and I'm still here, and I've still stayed sober. I haven't gotten drunk over any of it, one day at a time. And if I can do it, you can do it too. It doesn't have to be, hard stuff doesn't have to be the place where we just check out and can't deal with it. I'm learning that I am stronger than I think.
Yeah, that's a great message. Thank you for sharing that. I usually end with the same two questions, and one is, what do you think people don't understand about addiction?
Oh, geez. How all-consuming it is. How basically it's all between the ears, and it's also in the body, and it's bigger than me. It's way bigger than me, and I don't try to fight it. I deflect from it. If I try to fight it and say I'm not going to do it, it makes it bigger.
That's the rebel in you. If you could speak to someone in the darkest days of their addiction, what would you say to them?
There's hope. There is hope. And it does. This is very corny, but just worry about where you're at right in this moment. Don't worry about what you've done or what you're going to do. You just worry about right now. What do you need to do to not use or to drink? What do you need to do right now? What is one thing you can do right now? And also, as a whole, I'd love to tell the people that listen that things do get better, addiction-wise, and just every decade has its own gifts. And so when I was younger, in my 20s and 30s, I thought, this is fucked up and it's going to be fucked up the rest of my life. And I was not really hopeful, but I've seen through experience that every birthday has its gifts. And I get less fucks to give, more personal freedom. And I have more joy and love and light in my life. And I'll tell you that I've been single for a really long time. I'd given up ever finding anyone that I wanted to share a life with, because it's easier to be peaceful when you're by yourself, except for my animals. Like, animals have always gotten me through life. They've been my life partners. But someone came into my life in the last 2 years, and we're getting married. And so I would have said that would never in a million years happen to me. I would never be able to be myself in a relationship, nor want to be around someone all the time. But that dream of loving someone and being loved and accepted for who I am has come true. And the way it came true was I just quit. I gave up on it. And I just lived my life. And it just happened. And I opened up to the love. I just opened up. I said yes one more time, then I said no. And that's been a huge part of my current life, is now I'm planning a wedding.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. Yeah, it's so true. You never know what's going to happen in recovery. And just because you feel like complete and utter shit today and yesterday and the day before that doesn't mean that tomorrow might not be better.
Right. But if you keep doing the same thing, like, you have to get out of bed in order to make it happen.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah, you have to get out of bed. You have to sleep. You have to eat. You have to breathe. You have to talk to someone or go somewhere. Like, they're not going to come to you in your little room. You have to go out. And that's the hard part. The isolation is bigger than the addiction. And it has been in my life.
Yeah, well, it's amazing to hear your story and see how far you've come, and you're an inspiration. And I love the affirmations thing. And I'm so happy you're going to get married. And I'm really glad that you came on to talk to me today. So thank you so much for your time. It's been really nice.
Thanks, Early. It's absolutely been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Recovery Demystified. If you like what you heard, share it with a friend or rate and review us so we can reach a larger audience. Recovery Demystified is produced and edited by me, Early Brunner. Stevie Pettit made our logo. Our beautiful theme music is by Logan Bragg, and our social media manager is Kaylee Bausch. We are entirely supported by your generous donations as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can find a link to donate in the description. May you be happy and free, dear listener.